So once again, welcome everyone. I am so thrilled to have you here with us today. You are here for the APH Connect Center Vision Aware webinar, Coping with Your Feelings About Vision Loss. This is a very pertinent topic for a lot of people. So with me today is my partner in crime and colleague, Pris Rogers, and she is going to then take over for a moment and introduce our panel while I get some things happening in the chat for you guys. Pris, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Melanie. We're very lucky to have three great panelists with us here today. We have Bill Boules, who has been a professional in the field of vision rehab for over 20 years. He has lots of degrees, including master's degrees in vision rehabilitation therapy and orientation mobility, and he went to Western Michigan University, which is a university known for its training in people in vision loss and serving people with vision loss. He was diagnosed with retinitis pigmentosa when he was very young. He has been through the VR system from public school to adulthood, and currently is the Associate Director of Rehab and Reintegration at the Vision Center of Excellence. He also does a podcast called The Field of Vision to help identify and find solutions for people and families living with vision loss. So welcome, Bill. We also have Sharon Hughey, who works at the APH Connect Center as an information and referral specialist. We're very lucky to have Sharon. She has a lot of background in our field and in clinical psychology. In fact, she has her PhD in clinical psychology and her master's in divinity from Fuller Schools of Psychology and Theology. She worked as a licensed psychologist in private practice for over 20 years before she retired in 2014. She also worked in an urban school system and with several organizations for people with disabilities, including visual impairment. Now she's working with us, and like I said, we're very, very lucky to have Sharon with us, and especially working the INR line. And lastly, we have Becky Andrews, who is a peer advisor for Vision Aware, and she's a licensed clinical mental health counselor and owner of Resilient Solutions, which is an individual, marital, and family therapy practice. And she's the clinical director there of 18 therapists. She's married to what she calls her best friend and captain of their tandem bike. So you might want to watch out for Becky running around on her bike. They have 2 children. She has an active life, and she's gone cycling across the country. And she wants to look forward. She's looking forward to doing that again after all this COVID stuff has passed. So I hope you get to do that soon, Becky. Becky has RP, and she's accompanied in her life by her 3rd guide dog, Georgie. She's also a published author of her memoir, Look Up, Move Forward, My Journey of Losing Eyesight and Finding My Vision. So Becky's doing a lot of writing for us too on Vision Aware. So we're really glad to have her with us here today. So Melanie, back to you.
Thank you, Pris. And just to reiterate what Pris says, we have a wonderful panel here for you today, and they're going to talk all about, what you can expect to feel during and after vision loss. And so recently, both Sharon and Becky have written blog posts. And I guess that reminds me to mention to you all that we will be sending out a follow-up email after this webinar. And in that follow-up email will be a link to a list of resources that we've compiled for you. So anything that you hear today in this webinar will be in that resource list. So don't worry about taking notes, sit back and relax and listen and have a great time. Okay, you guys? So to get us started off, I just wanted to, there we go. I'm sorry. Can you all hear me now? I don't know what happened just there. Okay, good. To get us started, I just thought I would start us off with a bit of a question, and we'll see what happens from there. I wonder if you guys could talk to us a little bit about what can folks expect to feel. Now, I know that there are just a myriad of feelings out there, and certainly vision loss will be different for everyone. But in general, can you all talk a little bit about what people can expect to feel? Any of you all can feel free to start.
Sure. So I can kind of start. The one thing that I think people go through immediately is they're terrified. And I think somebody just commented on that in the chat. But it absolutely is terror. It is like you can expect to feel sometimes shame. You can expect to feel inadequate. These are things that are normal, and with time, uh, those feelings tend to sometimes become a little stronger. But then you start getting used to your new life. You get used to being comfortable in your own skin. But it takes a while, and it takes a lot of patience, and it takes a lot of trial and error when you're going through it. So that's a number one for me is I think people feel those feelings of inadequacy. They feel those feelings of terror. They feel those feelings of just being ashamed. And in order for us to talk about how to cope with vision loss, we first have to be honest about some of the things that people feel when they're first going through it.
Sure. Thank you, Bill.
And in addition to that, anxiety is really common. Feeling down is really common. Feeling very overwhelmed, like I don't even know where to start, and incredibly frustrated and angry, because it's like everything you do sometimes becomes really frustrating.
Sure. Yeah. Becky,
I'm
did you
sitting.
have anything to add to that? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I just feel like I'm nodding my head in such agreement to what you guys have said, that whatever we can feel all the feels, so to speak, and normalizing that, and being able to have a space to feel that it's a life-changing experience, that there's hope. Life can be good, but that space where you're navigating it can be challenging, and just understanding that okay, I'm going through this process.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's all normal.
Yeah.
And
I'm also going to say, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, please.
No, so I'm also going to say that the words that we choose when talking about vision loss, and you'll see a blog article that I've written that will come out probably this Sunday. But the words that we choose when we talk to someone who is experiencing vision loss are extremely important. And I get a lot of heat for this in the field, but I stay away from words like blind in the beginning, because of course a person is losing eyesight and they're becoming blind. But that word is like a bomb going off when you hear that word, especially if you haven't gone through vision loss before. So when you sit there and hear that word blind in the beginning, it is absolutely aggressive. It's something that people are knocked back by that word.
Sure.
So I use words like vision loss. I use words like visually impaired. I use words that are a lot softer than that dreaded B word. And eventually, of course, you get to words like blind, and it is what it is. But until a person is comfortable enough to be able to even think about that in that way, the words we choose to use are extremely important. And I'm not trying to be PC. I'm just trying to be effective with people who are going through it. And so, so that's my opinion. Those words are really important. The way that we describe what the person is going through is really important, because from a psychosocial standpoint, people are just are feeling all the things that I mentioned earlier, and hearing that word blind is just going to knock them back,
Sure.
So
I have heard before that when someone starts to lose vision, it can also feel a lot like losing a limb or even losing a loved one. And I'm wondering then if you all think that this starts to get into grief and the phases of grief. And is that something that you all think is relevant? And if so, can you speak to that?
Absolutely. I think acknowledging that sometimes we can feel like, what's wrong with me, or what, and to acknowledge that, like, I'm experiencing a loss that can be, there's a lot of ambiguous losses that we experience, as well as just that big picture of grief, and to be able to put some words to it and say, okay, this is grief. I might be feeling some denial or some shock or some bargaining or that sadness and depression and that anger, that we go through that journey and then that acceptance or acknowledgement. And you think we can go, unfortunately, it's not like a staircase that you're like, check, like we can go through that and then come back to that. And so I think that I know that helped me to recognize that, oh, okay, that's part of the journey. And I know when my mom said, she kind of gave me permission to feel and said, you might feel angry about that. Somehow it lifted that a little bit. Like, oh, okay, I can have some anger and process that. Gives you that space.
She gave permission. Yeah.
So we're getting a lot of agreement in the chat in terms of the words you use. And,
Right.
and I'm gonna pile on and say that a lot of times the stages of grief for me, I remember going through all that stuff. I remember being what I was calling visually impaired when I was a young teenager, and going from being visually impaired to being blind. Like when I had to use a cane, when I absolutely had to use a cane, that's the only time I actually started using a cane. I was concerned with what the neighbors thought, with what the people at church thought, the people at the grocery store, people riding with me on the bus, people that knew me at school. I didn't want to use a cane. And that's just not something that applies to a teenager. That applies to anybody losing vision at any point during their life. So
Absolutely.
I would hide my cane in my backpack. I would stick it in my backpack. The only time that I would use it is when I got to the bus stop, because the bus was darker on the inside. So I had a lot of trouble seeing on the bus when I was on the bus, like finding a seat and things like that. But when I would get home, and I always tell this story on the field of vision, like I always, this is something, and when I talk to groups, I always talk to people about some of the things that I used to do that were bad, but they were also normal and natural for somebody going through vision loss to do. I would take my cane and I would fold it up the minute I got off that bus, and I would walk home from the bus stop, which was several blocks. I would walk home without using a cane because I was afraid of what the neighbors would think. I was afraid of what other people on the street walking past me would think. People that knew my family, and they all knew that I was visually impaired. But in my head, I was convinced that there were going to be judgments made about me, and that there would be, serious conversations that were had that I didn't want being had in public. So. That kind of stuff is just normal. And so I see a lot of agreement in the chat. People have been typing stuff in, and I appreciate you guys for contributing to this conversation. So yeah,
absolutely. I agree. I see a lot of people in the chat that this is resonating with, and so keep those comments coming. We definitely want to make sure that we're on the right track, and we will definitely be taking questions, no doubt about it. So I would ask that you save your questions as much as possible to the end so that we can definitely keep track of those, but absolutely keep that coming. So Becky, in your blog, you wrote a little bit that said something to the effect of your thoughts lead into feelings and your feelings lead into actions. And given what Bill just said about the words you tell yourselves and those thoughts, how do you then begin to change your thoughts into something more productive? If you're feeling that embarrassment, that shame, and that anger, how do you work through that and start to then think differently?
Yeah, that's so important, isn't it? And I think of shame resilience. When we're able to talk about it, it loses its power. Shame is in that internal. And when we're able to reach out and say, hey, I'm feeling this way, it helps us. And so we have our feelings, and then we have our thoughts, and then we choose our actions. And so our feelings are valid. They're just what comes up for us. And then when we look at our thoughts, we can kind of get curious about those, because you think we have all sorts of thoughts that are not facts. I certainly had thoughts about using a cane, about those different adjustment processes. And so to challenge those thoughts, I look this way if I'm using my cane, or whatever you might have. And then to be able to kind of challenge those thoughts, understanding what's coming up for you, and then doing a supportive action that works. An example, I was feeling anxious, kind of uncomfortable when I started using the cane, and had some probably negative thoughts. And so my action was I reached out to my O&M instructor. We had, I had all the training, but there was a block in my head about I could so relate, Bill, about pulling out the cane all the way and using it. And she allowed me, she gave me that space to just have that conversation and process my identity and what was coming up for me and how this cane could be helpful to me. And it really helped. It was the action that helped move me forward.
Excellent.
So I think.
Yeah. And also Nicole commented in the thread that, many people who are younger, don't really start to use their cane until they're injured. Now, luckily that did not happen to me. Not because I wasn't using or I wasn't wanting to use my cane. I had a choice to make. And the choice was you either start using your cane or you stay home. And I stayed home for a very long time, and I got tired of staying home. I got tired of being alone and not going out into the community, not, making friendships and establishing relationships with people. So I would only hang out around visually impaired people for a long time. And then I came to a crossroad and I had to make a decision. I had to say, well, I don't want to be ashamed all my life. I don't want to be embarrassed all my life. So it started to kind of kick in when it had to, when I almost had no choice. So thankfully I didn't get it. And then I have been injured, but it wasn't because I didn't want to use my cane. Like I've taken some spills. I've taken some pretty serious bumps. But again, it wasn't because I didn't want to use my cane. It was just because I either made a mistake and used it wrong, or I hadn't quite opened it yet, like stuff like that. It wasn't because this was later on. I think all of us have taken some spills for silly reasons like you should have been using your cane better.
Yeah.
But so that's the thing. And we got
Absolutely.
somebody.
I see a
ahead, sorry.
comment in the chat that I really would love to hear your feedback about, the three of you, is how do you reconcile your identity as a person rather than as your cane? Because boy, I mean, and you are all speaking to that, but I think, and all of us on this panel, except for Pris, she's the odd one out this time. All of us on the panel, though, for those of you who may not be able to see us, we are all visually impaired or blind. And so I know even myself, throughout the years, and I've been legally blind since birth, there have definitely been times I've struggled. And identity is so tied up with who we are and how we present ourselves to the world, and how we feel about ourselves inside. And when you're dealing with a loss, especially on top of just the whole identity piece, I think it can get really messy. So I wonder, how do you begin to reconcile that you are not your cane, you are not your blindness?
I think even as someone who was born blind, basically, I really came to a crossroads, and it took me until my 50s, really, or maybe 40s, to get unconsciously. I figured that I either had to be blind or I had to be a person. And only then, finally, did I integrate the fact that you are both. You are a person who happens to be blind. And I remember that emotionally, when I came to grips with that, I could barely talk for about 2 days. It overwhelmed me in a wonderful way.
Wow.
It was like, wow, I am a person. My whole identity isn't blind. I am more than that. In fact, that's not even the most important thing. It isn't even even close to the most important thing about me. So yeah, you don't just stop being you when you lose a sense. You are still you. You're just moving and working and living in a somewhat different way.
Mhm.
It's interesting because when I got my guide dogs, I think my identity changed again, and a little bit. And the holding onto that harness, the dog almost became a part of me. Not really, but I mean, I knew the difference obviously between me and dog, but it, I don't know, it was this weird feeling that like, wow, this is part of me. And then when I stopped using a dog, I went through another, oh, I've lost that part of me, even though I'm just fine.
Mhm. Mhm.
So yeah, I think if you can integrate the fact that you are still you and you always will be you, it's just that
Yeah.
you've lost not only a sense, but you've lost all the things that sense used to be able to do for you. And
Yeah.
now you're finding new ways to do it using different senses and different ways of being in the world, but you're still you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. We're getting a lot of good feedback in the chat. Becky, did you want to say something?
Yeah,
Sounded like you started.
I can so relate to that. I feel like in that initial stages, that loss feels like it's right in the forefront, that awareness of what you're doing. It feels like your whole identity. And then now it feels like it's just, I'm a mom, a runner, a professional, I'm blind, I'm a grandma. That's fun new title. And and it feels good when it is. It's just if it's just part of who I am, but not
The whole.
the whole.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So I'm going to tell you that my cane is and has really never to me been my identity. It's been part of me. It's been, because I think there's two ways. It's how you see yourself and it's how others see you, like how society sees you. So when I walk into a restaurant, when I walk into a store at the mall, the first thing people notice about me clearly is going to be my cane, right? I mean, that's just, it just sticks out, right?
Sure.
But literally, and no pun intended, but it does. It sticks out, and it's part of what the first thing is that people notice about me, and so unfortunately, that's a thing that you have to go through within yourself, is learning to be comfortable in your own skin, learning how to not make the cane be who you are to you. It's going, and also accepting the fact that society has preconceived ideas about what it's like to be blind, and how terrible it is and all that kind of stuff. But they're going to see you that way. But that doesn't mean, just because somebody sees something a certain way, it doesn't mean that that's the picture. The picture is how you feel and how you move through life and things like that. So I mean, there's a lot to be said about identity and cane, but a lot of it is you being comfortable in your own skin. A lot of it is letting society do what it does and trying as best as you can to educate. But if you can't, if you get to a point where the person's still not listening or not paying attention or whatever, if they don't get it, you've got to still live your life. There's going to be people that simply don't get it. There's a lot of things in life that I don't get. That doesn't mean that doesn't mean that I'm not going to continue to try. But some people, if I don't understand certain things, they're just going to move on and go about their life, and I'll try to figure it out.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Yeah, thanks, guys. So a couple of things. There again, excellent comments in the chat, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But I do want to ask. This is maybe like a 2 or 3 part question. How can people know that what they're feeling is both normal and okay? And then also, when do you know that it's time to reach out for more help? We'll go there first, and then and then I'll follow up. Yeah. Does anybody have any thoughts on that?
as far as reaching out for help, I think in the beginning, it's extremely important to reach out for help, but I think it's also a private matter. And again, the blog post that I wrote, we talk a lot about having conversations about vision loss, and how in the beginning, it's just a really, really private matter. People don't want that stuff being discussed out in the open. But getting into groups of people that are experiencing the same types of issues that you're experiencing, like sight loss support groups are absolutely valuable. They help you not only learn to cope with what you're going through, but they help you meet other people that are going through the same type of thing. They help you bounce ideas off of those people. They help you learn from those people. They help form long-lasting, lifelong friendships and relationships with those people, because you have something that's a common ground, and getting together on that in a group, some type of group setting, is extremely important. It's also important not to label it, even though it might be, right? It's very important not to label it as quote unquote therapy. Therapy works. Therapy is great for people, but therapy is also a word that carries some stigma with it, and people tend to shy away from that type of stuff. So if you just call it a group, if you call it, meeting and hanging out with other people that are going through the same thing as you, it might be a little bit better received by people that are starting to go through vision loss. So again, it's all in what you call something, and the words that you use to describe it. And I want to be clear, therapy is not a bad thing. Therapy works for millions of people all the time. But in the beginning, there is an absolute there's absolutely a stigma with it, and people aren't always necessarily ready. And I think a lot of times we force people into that type of stuff, getting them to, well, you need therapy, you need counseling, you need this, and it just becomes so difficult for people that they push away from it, and they push hard.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. And oh, go ahead, Becky. Did you start to say something?
As a therapist, I agree, and I think sometimes well-meaning people will feel like a challenge happened, so they need therapy. And I think it's important that we feel empowered to explore our options and see what's best for us. Sometimes we want to process with an individual therapist, and yet the power of a group for others that can relate to what we're going through is just so important. And so back to your original question, I think too, if we're having difficult emotion, if you're wondering, gosh, do I need what type of support do I need? Personally, I think talking to someone is helpful for all of us. We need that, and if we're having difficult emotions that are persisting and are stopping us from doing what we want to do, then it's time to say, gosh, I need to reach out to a therapist, or find a group, or get some additional training,
Or talk to people that have gone through it.
Right.
You don't need a therapist necessarily, but you just need somebody, a couple of people around you that can say, you know what, it's gonna be okay. And I'll walk with you through it until it is okay, because it will be okay. So I think you get help when you just can't deal with it anymore on your own, when it just becomes too overwhelming and too big and too hard. But also know that every single feeling you have is normal. Why? Because you're feeling it. It's a normal response to a really cruddy situation. You lost something, and this is a normal response to that, and it'll get better, and it'll be okay. And it's not the end of the world, but it feels like it at first.
So I'm wondering then, I want to get at something a little bit, it may be a little bit more difficult to talk about, but when do you know that what you're feeling maybe isn't, and it's not normal, may not be the right word, but unsafe, that your level of depression or your level of fear, anxiety, or anger is destructive? And when is the appropriate time to say, okay, this is not, maybe it's normal, but it's not good, it's unhealthy at this point?
When you don't want to get up and do anything, when you cry all day, when you feel like killing yourself, when you can't sleep, when you can't concentrate at all, when you can't problem solve or make decisions, yeah, it's probably a good time to see somebody.
Yeah.
So there's two things, anonymity and technology. And again, people were commenting in the chat about technology, and what's happening is with Zoom, with platforms that are accessible and people are able to do this type of stuff, you can do some of that stuff via virtually. You can do it virtually, but here's the thing. I also think that there's a big difference in when somebody actually is able to sit next to you and talk to you in a way that's more personal. The virtual stuff is great, but it's in the beginning, it's really good to actually be in the same space with the person or with other people that are going through the same type of stuff as you are. There's a huge benefit to that. But then Zoom helps. Again, you can sign in, just put your first name in Zoom or whatever, and it could be pretty anonymous, and people when they don't have a first and last name and other people knowing who they are, it's very easy for them to open up when someone, like, they'll make a judgment about that person, but it's not, it's an anonymous kind of thing. So it doesn't really hurt you as much inside, when you're going through that stuff and when people are responding to you. So there's a lot to be said for technology, but I am a strong proponent of people being in the same space with one another, especially in the beginning. That's where those relationships are formed. That's where they're formed, and that's where they continue.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah.
And that's where you can begin to be shown some things hands-on too. I mean, if somebody's sitting next to you and they say, well, this is how I do it, let me show you how I do it.
Right.
That can't be done on Zoom very well.
Yeah. I want to go back a little bit, just to go back and talk a little bit more about feelings that get into a more dangerous or dark place, and how to really recognize when you're going there, and what you can begin to do to find the help that you need and to start adjusting and coping. I don't want to gloss over that too quickly.
I think when you feel dark and you feel dark, get help. When you feel dark and maybe even don't know you feel dark, ask people around you, how dark does this feel to you in terms of where I am right now? Check, and you can be anonymous. You can call hotlines anonymously. You can choose the kind of help you get, but the only way out is through, and running from it isn't going to make it go away, and it's not going to make it easier. In fact, it may make it harder. The only way out is through, and there are plenty of people and organizations that can help you with that. And so the sooner you reach out, the more help you'll get, and actually probably the easier the journey will be.
Yeah, absolutely. Getting a lot of affirmative responses in the chat. People, this is really resonating with people, I think. Becky, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I visualize a tunnel, with our feelings, and if you're feeling stuck and not able to just process that feeling, then the power of connection and getting that support and help. I think we're not meant to do this life alone, and there's so to be aware of that, and like, gosh, yes, this feeling is not going away. It's heavy and it's difficult and understandable that you have it, but acknowledging that there is help out there too, to help you move through that.
Yeah, and I think you really touched on something, that we are not meant to go through this life alone. And we have really seen that really evidenced in the pandemic. Isolation has been so hard on many of us, and especially those of us experiencing vision loss. So I think that's a really valid point to bring up. And just to kind of shift gears into something a little bit happier. What are some ways, do you think, then, that you can inform other people in your life about your vision loss, to let them know that they don't have to be afraid to talk about it, or the ways that feel best for you to talk about it. Are there any things that you would say to that, any of you?
Are we saying, are you saying how to approach someone about
No,
your feelings going through it, or?
Well, yeah. So if you have family or friends who you can sense that they want to talk about it, but they don't know how to talk about it because they may be afraid that you don't want to talk about it.
Just start talking about it.
And so are there any things that you would say to someone who's new to vision loss that may not know themselves how to talk about vision?
The beauty of that is you get to control it very often, not always, but you get to control it. You get to do it in your space. You get to do it privately. You can do it on the phone so they don't have to see your facial expressions, or there's lots of ways to do it. And it all starts with a, hey, let me ask you a question, right? What do you think about like the stuff that I'm going through with my vision? And if you're the one that starts that conversation, then you get to dictate the pace of that conversation. You also get to dictate when and where it takes place and how it takes place.
And you give permission for it to happen.
And you give permission for it to happen. So it takes a person, that's 100% correct. You give permission for it to happen. I wasn't even thinking down that line, but you absolutely do. And it takes a person like off of like it takes them off of their heels and puts them on their toes and lets them understand that you're able to have this conversation now. And it's going to be challenging for them at first. They're still going to be in kind of like, what do I say? Oh my God, where do I go with this? What does he or she want me to say? But you get to dictate the pace. You get to say, hey, seriously, it's okay. Tell me what you're thinking. Let me describe to you what's actually happening. Let's go, let me show you online what some other people that have the same type of eye condition as I do, are going through. So you can do that. There's Facebook groups. For example, retinitis pigmentosa has several Facebook groups that you can be a part of. If you've got RP and you're starting to lose your eyesight because of RP, there's Facebook groups where you could go and read what other people are posting, and you can do it anonymously. You don't have to post. You could just be in there and just read what other people are going through. And a lot of it starts to click in because you're not going to go through the same thing that everyone is posting about on there, but there's going to be a few people, right? There's going to be a few people where you're sitting there and you go, hey, yeah, that is what I'm thinking. That is what I'm feeling. I'm losing my driver's license. This person can't drive anymore. I'm going through this thought of dealing with my driver's license and dealing with issues of independence. That kind of stuff is so helpful, even if you do it anonymously, even if you don't contribute to the conversation. You're reading what people all over the world, not just in your neighborhood, not just in your town, but all over the world are posting about their eye condition and them going through vision loss. And that's so powerful. It really is.
And so validating.
Yeah, you can listen to podcasts. Like, I mean, I guess I'd be shameless about it. You can listen to The Field of Vision. I've got interviews on The Field of Vision where we talk to people that are telling their story. The latest podcast that we put up is an author that has written a book about her journey with vision loss and stuff like that. So there's a lot of stuff that's out there, but it starts with how to handle it. And I'm seeing a lot of stuff in the thread about suicide and self-harm and stuff like that. And I got to be honest, like, those feelings are normal.
Absolutely.
But there is a world out there that you're going to be missing out on.
Yeah.
There's a lot that you're going to be missing out on.
So much.
And it all starts with getting comfortable in your own skin and realizing that you're your own worst critic. We are so destructive to our own selves as human beings. I'm not even talking about people who are blind or losing vision. We're so destructive to our own selves with the criticism that we have of ourselves. We're so much more critical of ourselves than anybody else could possibly be of us. And even those who might say something that sounds critical, it gets amplified in our own heads. We're amplifying that criticism. And it's not always an accurate depiction of what's actually going on. There's a lot of support out there, even though it may not be labeled as support. there's a lot of ways to help people get comfortable in their own skin and start to live life differently, but still live life normally. And that's really, really important.
Yeah, the most recent comment is that this is validating, and I have to just wholeheartedly agree. You guys are just bringing up such wonderful, um, points to consider and things to really to focus on. It's not easy. There is nothing about this that's easy. And that brings me to, I've seen a couple people say something about humor and how to inject humor. I'm wondering if you all have any humor as it relates to either talking with people, or how do you begin to laugh at yourself, just injecting humor into life, because oh my gosh, it can be a pretty awful place sometimes. What do y'all think about that?
You think humor just lightens it for us, doesn't it?
It really does.
It sure does.
It lifts the moment. And I think there's times where you're kind of like in that hard space, and maybe it's hard to find humor about your situation yet, and you find humor in different ways, or make sure that you laugh with someone each day. Then I think I know felt good to me when I could laugh about some of the things that I did, the funny situations that you might get pulled into, that it just, you go, oh, this feels good to just be able to laugh and know that each of us experience those embarrassing, funny moments.
We sure do, don't we? Can you think of any, can you all think of any funny moments that you've experienced where you've laughed at, you've been able to laugh at yourself? Because I can think of the very famous walking past a mirror and saying, excuse me. We all have, I call them my blind moments, Have you all experienced anything like that?
I remember when I was 12 and I was with an orientation mobility instructor. And actually, I was with them and their trainee, and they were way behind me talking, I guess, about what my lesson was about and all that. And I went up to this street corner and I took my cane and I hit this thing, but it didn't make a noise. And I was so puzzled by the fact that it did not make a noise. It didn't ding like a metal thing. It didn't click like a plastic. There was no noise. And I'm like, what is that? So I hit it harder and there was still no noise. And so I hit it harder and there was still no noise. And my instructor comes up to me and he says, you're about to be arrested for police brutality. It was a policeman standing there. I thought it was a pole, and so I kept hitting it to see what it would do. And the policeman was just so fascinated by the fact that I looked so puzzled that he just kept standing there letting me do that. And finally he said hi, and I was like, hi.
Yeah, for sure.
But I will never forget that. And I think there are some times that are just really funny.
Yeah.
So as an adult.
Yeah, Bill.
Oh, yeah. So as an adult, like 3 years ago, I'm comfortable with vision loss. I'm comfortable using the word blind. I'm comfortable with my cane. I'm comfortable with assistive technology. I wake up in the morning, put a bowl of cereal, put the cereal in the bowl. I go grab the milk out of the refrigerator and proceed to pour apple cider all over my cereal. All right. And because the jug felt the same. The apple cider jug felt exactly the same as the milk jug. Yeah. And guess what? I manned up and ate it because just, like I wasn't gonna. It is what it is. It was gross, but what I'm telling you guys is that kind of stuff just happens. It makes you feel silly. If my friends happen to be here, I would have felt terrible. But it would have been really funny to serve somebody a bowl of cereal with apple cider in it. Sorry, it just is what it is. All right. So there's a lot of stuff like that. Yeah. There's a lot of like not knowing what can is what, and opening a can of you're thinking you want like some canned peaches or something like that, and you open a can of beets by accident. You know what I mean? It's that kind of stuff that kind of it brings you down to earth. You laugh about it and you move on. And
I just had an avocado, what I thought was blueberry and vanilla smoothie pudding. It was peas, not blueberries.
Oh
You
no.
know, so you
Oh
just go on,
goodness.
you know, you have to laugh. This is,
Yeah, yeah. I've seen some really, there are some great stories in the chat. I'm also reminded of one of our friends and vision aware peer advisors has been out in her golf cart before and gotten out of the golf cart and went to get into another golf cart or back into it and got into the wrong golf cart and actually left in that golf cart. So I just think of all the things that we all do, and being able to laugh about it is just, there is just something very validating about it and very freeing. It can be hard to get there, I think, where you're able to laugh, but it sure is good when you do, I think.
There is no better story than the person who is blind coming out of the grocery store thinking they're being picked up by their husband or their wife or
oh yeah,
girlfriend or
Yes,
whatever,
oh
yes.
and
yeah,
just jumping into the
getting in the
wrong
wrong
car
car.
and
Yeah.
having a woman who's driving that car scream at the top of her lungs because she thinks she's being carjacked or something. That didn't happen to me, but it did happen to a friend of mine. Yeah, no, really, it was a friend. I'm not kidding. It was really a friend. I didn't do it.
It
But,
wasn't
no,
you, it
I
really was
really
a
didn't
friend.
do it. It actually was a friend. But honestly, one of the funniest stories. And this woman just lost it and screamed bloody murder, and it was horrifying for everyone involved while it happened. But now we tell the story, and it's hilarious.
Yeah,
So
of course.
it's all about timing, and it's all
Yeah.
about perspective.
Yeah, yeah. And I think a lot of times we have this huge fear that people are looking at us, that people are judging us. And I suspect that we have built that up way bigger than it is in our own heads, that people
Mhm.
really are not paying that much attention to us. Yes, our canes
Yes.
do make us look different, no doubt about it. And it's harder to blend in. But most of the time, people are worried about their own stuff, in air quotes, they're not paying a lot of attention to us. I really feel that way. Now, that being said, it doesn't make it any easier not to worry about these things, but I think there's truth to that. Yeah,
People are much too preoccupied with their lives to pay much attention to what you're doing.
exactly.
And I think what we're sharing is too that the benefit of that outreach, to have others that you can laugh and share about it with, especially at first, kind of just lifts it too. So we're not carrying it inside, but we're able to find the humor about it.
Yeah, yeah. I like this. I just heard a comment that someone's married to someone that looks like Brad Pitt, or so he tells me. Who am I to say otherwise? I love that. That's great. Yes, absolutely.
Somebody poured salad dressing on their pancakes instead of syrup. That's an awesome story.
Yep.
Well, and
Yeah,
that
yeah.
exact thing
That's
happened.
exactly.
That happened to me when I took my daughter out to breakfast one day. She was 4 years old, and so I was pouring what I thought was pancake syrup on her pancakes, and it turned out to be malted vinegar. And she tasted it, and she said, "Mom, this is not syrup." And I thought, oh, well, the container looked about the same. So in any case, so let's switch gears just a little bit again. I want to talk now about some things, some practical things that people can begin to do to adjust to not only their feelings, but just life in general, the new lives that we're leading when we're dealing with vision loss. So what can people, one of you, and I'm sorry, I don't remember which of you, wrote about in your blogs about cognitive behavior therapy.
Yeah, that's me.
And so what is that, and how can it help? And then if you don't want to speak to that, about just some practical things that we can begin to do to deal with those feelings and deal with the new life.
I think it's a matter of perspective. Cognitive behavior therapy is a therapy that kind of helps you. You could work with a therapist. You can go read self-help books on your own, like the Feeling Good, the Good Mood Therapy book, and the Feeling Good Handbook that are both on Bookshare. You can go and just start doing things like writing down your feelings and asking yourself, how much do I feel those feelings? Like, is it 90%? And then like putting your thoughts down, like, I feel so stupid, I'll never do anything right. Well, that's all or nothing thinking. That's never and always. You've never done anything you right in your entire life. Do you feel stupid every single minute of every single day? Really? Do you? Or maybe you're just kind of generalizing, all or nothing thinking. And maybe if you could say, at that moment, I felt stupid, or I felt like I can't do this right. Well, that's very different than I can't do anything right. And so the thoughts that we tell ourselves are going to make us feel worse if we're really going around thinking that. And so if you can kind of be a little easier on yourself in terms of the all or nothing thinking or the overgeneralization, really take your thoughts and critique them a bit and say, is that really true? Or do I just feel like that's true?
Yeah. Yeah. Good ideas. Becky or Bill, either of you have anything to that? Practical tips?
Yeah. Two little thoughts on it that I think sometimes, it can feel big when
Yep.
it's something feels big, to break it down into smaller steps.
Yeah.
And so that space of, okay, today I'm good. What can I master and what can I find joy in? Sometimes just finding something, something that you say, this is something new I'm going to try. I'm going to learn, how to use my phone, or, something that way. I think just that small aspect can be helpful. Another thing that,
And then celebrate it when you get it.
right. Yeah.
Celebrate it.
Yeah. So often we don't acknowledge that at the end of the day. Okay, what did I master today? What did I find joy in? I think, the three C's of healing, I think, really kind of apply here too, where if you think about it, they are connection, compassion, and contribute. And I think, again, that, like, if we can think of a way that we can connect in the day, a way that we can show ourselves compassion, and some way that we're contributing, then, that kind of moves us forward.
Can you elaborate a little bit on that, Becky? What do you mean connect to who or what, and how can we find compassion, and how can we contribute?
Yeah, so you think it, to me, I think of when we're feeling alone and isolated, we're going through something new, might be vision loss, something else, to have a small game plan. So if you were thinking about, okay, I'm gonna utilize those 3 C's. I'm gonna connect. I'm gonna reach out and make that call to, the services to the blind, or that friend that maybe could be a mentor, or that group on Facebook that I think I could join, just a step to connect. And then compassion is that space of giving yourself that same compassion that we would give to someone else, to acknowledge this is a challenging experience I'm going through.
Yep.
May I be kind to myself. Just acknowledging it for what it is helps us, actually gives us more motivation and energy. And then that sense that, we need to contribute. And I think it's challenging for sometimes when we're new to vision loss, we can, feel like, how can I contribute when obviously we can contribute in so many ways, but to intentionally say, what's a way that I can contribute and help someone else?
Oh yeah, I think there's so much power in that too, to be able, and we have a blog post coming out soon about volunteerism. There's so many ways that we can give back. And that just, again, it just helps us to feel valid and worthwhile and worthy, is to be able to give back. So I really, and I'm seeing in the chat that people really like the connect and compassion and contribute. I think that's a really good one.
On the
Bill,
compassion piece too,
sure.
if you can say to yourself, would I treat someone else going through vision loss the way I'm treating myself right now? Would I
Oh,
really,
yes.
if it was my friend, would I be thinking the same things about them that I'm thinking about myself? Would I
Mhm.
really think that?
Yeah.
I think it's a good checkpoint.
Yeah. Yeah. Bill,
I
do you
will
have
say,
anything to add? I'm sorry. Go
yeah.
ahead.
So no, it's okay. So in terms of mastering something and finding things that bring you joy, um, you can find joy in what you've mastered, right? We talk about small things that you build into bigger things. So something like an orientation and mobility lesson, where you first begin with mastering learning your room, then
Mhm.
your house, then the block that goes around your house, then you expand that, and then you just keep building and building and building, and take joy and
Mhm.
take the opportunity to take time to not only joy but enjoy
Mhm.
the accomplishments that you've put together while you're doing all that type of stuff. And I will tell you that nothing I have found builds more confidence in someone than orientation and mobility, and being able to
Mhm.
master moving around their environment safely. That is a huge shot in the arm to people's ego and to their confidence. And when you master those things, not only does it help your ego, your confidence, it also helps you do things competently.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot to that. When you talk about like little kids, for example, I'm a former wrestler. I used to wrestle in high school. I wrestled in college. I wrestled after college. And learning how to wrestle, learning my environment around a wrestling mat, around a workout room, around all that stuff, really helped build confidence in me. And it helped me be able to master my environment as I grew up and as I was getting into bigger and bigger settings.
Yeah.
I can now move through my environment very comfortably, even if it's a new one. And that's a huge thing for people. So it's all about skill building and taking the time to really enjoy the accomplishments that you've achieved.
And I think you bring up a really good point, Bill, that, it doesn't have to start with you traveling on a bus across the city. It can start in your own room or your own backyard. It's those small victories that just compound every time you build on them, I think. So that's a really good point. Um, we are at the hour, so it's 3 o'clock and we have a half an hour left. I want to make sure that we get to your questions. So if you guys want to start talking about some of the things that you have questions around, feel free to go ahead and start putting those in the chat and we'll field those out. But I wanted to take just a moment, if we could, to touch on a subject that has come up a lot lately, both on the Connect Center information and referral line, as well as in emails and on the blog. And that is a thing called Charles Bonnet syndrome. And I don't know if our audience is familiar with it, but Sharon, I know that you have had some experience with it and some knowledge around it. And I'm wondering, and it's not completely off topic because it does sort of touch on our feelings and what's
Oh, no,
happening.
it's not off topic at all
Um,
because you
so
feel crazy.
can you talk a little bit about
Yeah.
that syndrome and what it is and how to kind of begin to cope with it?
So sometimes when you lose vision, your brain wants to help. It wants to help so bad because it knows something's different, but it doesn't know what. And so, just like one part of your body will compensate and try to help another part, it's really, really trying to help you. And the way that it does that is by filling in what it thinks you should see with something. And so it starts doing things like you might see flowers or dots or patterns. You might see pictures. They might be pretty, they might be ugly, they might be scary, they might be beautiful. But they're not, they're not real because you're not where you should be seeing those. If you're sitting at your desk and you're looking at the wall in front of your desk and all of a sudden the wall is full of flowers or colors or patterns, what your wall should look like. And so but you start feeling like you're having visual hallucinations because you're seeing things that aren't there. But it doesn't mean that it's a psychiatric condition. It doesn't mean that you're crazy. it just simply means that your brain is trying to help you. And it's really trying to interpret your world for you. And it may not be doing it in a really helpful way, but it thinks it is. And so you end up, one of the ways to kind of cope is to kind of keep telling yourself, other people have this. It happens quite a bit when vision starts changing and you start losing vision. It doesn't mean I'm crazy. It has nothing whatsoever to do with psychiatry, or it's not really hallucinations. It's not, it feels like that, but it's not that. It's not real. I know it's not real. A lot of times when people have hallucinations, they really believe they're real. But usually with Charles Bennet, you know it's not real, but you can't figure out why it's happening. And so sometimes there's really nothing to do to treat it. There's really, sometimes if you open and close your eyes real quick, or you move around a little bit, or, it might help. And different people have kind of played with it and tried some things more or less successfully. But I think the important thing is just to know that it's your brain trying to help you. It's trying really, really hard. And sometimes it goes away pretty quickly. Other times it lasts years and years. But people do kind of get to the point where they say, okay, brain, I know what you're doing and I know it's not real. And thanks for helping me, but I know it's not real and I'm not going to pay attention to it. I'm going to pay attention to something else now. But just because we've had some people call really upset because they don't know what this is. And it can be really scary.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for just highlighting that, because I know it is a big issue, and I don't think that it's well understood by any stretch of the word. And I don't know if anyone in our audience is dealing with that, but if you are, at least now you know that there it's completely normal and it's completely okay, and you're not going crazy. Um, in that hopefully it'll hopefully resolve itself. So, does anyone, first, I just want to ask if anyone has any questions, because I have a couple of other things that I can certainly bring up if there are none. I know, Bill, you've been monitoring the chat also. So if you have anything that you want to speak to, please feel free to chime in about that. Let's see. And Chris is telling us that there is information about Charles Bonnet syndrome on the VisionAware website. And this might be a good time for me to share briefly about some of the resources that we do have on VisionAware, because VisionAware is a wonderful website that we have here at the Connect Center. And on VisionAware, we have several different areas. We have, of course, we have the Getting Started Guide, which is a downloadable file, or you can order it in large print and it can be mailed to you. And it's all about a lot of what we're talking about here today, some of the tips and tricks and ideas and suggestions around practical things you can do when you're new to vision loss, because there are so many things to think about. We also have an area on the website called Everyday Living. And in the Everyday Living section, we have all sorts of topics related to the essential life skills of living with low vision. So I cannot recommend that enough for you to check out. Everything from home repair to grooming and putting on makeup, all the way to gardening and you name it, it's in there. It's a wonderful, wonderful resource. And it's written largely by our vision aware peer advisors. These are people who have experienced vision loss themselves. And so they speak from experience. Many of them are professionals in the field, across the fields, I guess, in um, vision, as well as, Becky is one of our vision aware peer advisors, and she's in the field of mental health. And so they're, so the blogs is what I was getting to. The blogs on our site, we have blogs that are written by our peer advisors, and they are just a tremendous resource. I cannot speak highly enough about our peer advisors. And we have a section on the site all about low vision exams and eye conditions, a glossary of terms to define some of the terminology that you may hear around low vision. So let's see, just trying to see if we have any questions out there. I'm not seeing, but I will say I do have a question for you guys. When people are in the midst of losing vision and they want to work with someone one on one, a professional counselor or a therapist, um, I think that it can be difficult to find someone who understands what you're going through, because that is just it's not like a lot of other things that you may go to counseling for, or maybe it is. But my question is, are there specific strategies that you can use to find a professional who can help you specifically with your issues around vision loss?
So as far as I'm concerned, I think the right way to go about it is to find an agency that works with vision loss and blindness. That doesn't mean that they're going to succeed every single time in finding you that professional that understands vision loss and understands the things that you go through as you're experiencing vision loss. But there's a better chance of finding help and support that way than there is just randomly, going around looking for somebody to do it and doing it by trial and error. So I think it's really important to find an agency in your area that serves our community. I think it's also important to find somebody that you trust. Find somebody, even if it's someone on Facebook or someone that you listen to and that you trust and that you feel like they know what they're talking about. Ask them. The worst that'll happen is that they'll tell you that they don't know anyone in your area. The best thing that will happen is they'll make a connection for you and with you to get you support that you need, to get you a place where you need to go to be able to at least start the process of working through some of that stuff. And again, groups are extremely important. They're extremely useful. I can't talk enough
Sometimes
about
they're
groups.
more useful.
Correct. Absolutely. Sight loss support groups, even if you're doing it remotely. And again, I feel like a lot of it should be done in person, or as much of it as you can do it in person, because those relationships that you form are just really, really important. But there's ways to make that happen. And I'm here to tell you, you will benefit by joining groups, by being around people that are going through the same type of stuff that you're going through. It's obviously not all going to be the same. You're unique in the things that you think and feel and all that kind of stuff. That's really important to understand. But there are people that are going through similar things, and it's if you're looking for support, if you're looking to get comfortable in your own skin, there is no better way than to be around people that are going through similar things. And again, they're not all going to be your friends. They're not all going to be people that you want to spend time with and hang out with, but some of them will. Right. And there you go.
Yeah.
If you want help from a therapist, given the state of managed care in the United States of America, you're not going to find, most likely, a person who is either visually impaired themselves or who even may know the field. Because panels are structured in the way that they're structured, you've got a certain group of people on this panel, and that's your choice. If you're in an HMO or even if you're in a PPO, you don't necessarily have the, option to pick whoever you want unless you're going to pay out of pocket. And so given the fact that that's the case, if you're going to seek mental health resources, you can kind of tell in the first or second call, do they talk down to you? Are they patronizing? Do they start kind of talking all over the place because they're uncomfortable, and you can kind of pick that up. They don't quite know what to do with you. In the first session, if you're meeting with someone and they're just, they just don't know what to do. And they're nervous about that. And you can just kind of tell that's not a good fit. If they say, what would be the most helpful to you for me to do? That's a good start, because at least they're not assuming they know best. But if you're going to be with somebody like that, you shouldn't have to educate them about everything. They should be a person who's willing to learn on their own without you constantly being their educator. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. We've had in the Connect Center lately a number of therapists that have called us and reached out and said, I have a client. What do I do? Where do I go? How do I help? And that's been so refreshing to see
Yeah.
that they are actually wanting to know. And it's been fun working with people like that because they're teachable, they're reading the stuff, they're going to the webinars, they're reading the blogs, and they're engaging. And then they're going to be much more helpful to that client. And so you might want to actually, if you're going to work with the therapist and they're teachable and they want to learn, send them to Word Vision Aware and these other sites so that they can learn more without you always having to be the one to teach them.
Would you all say that there are parallels between dealing with vision loss and the loss of a loved one? And if that's true, would going to a grief counselor be appropriate? And or is it is there a way to find a counselor who's just skilled with disability in general? Because there are some commonalities. What
Yeah,
do you think about
the
that?
same things apply though, because if you're in panels, you're really stuck with who you're stuck with. I mean,
Sure.
it's just, but if you could reach out to a Center for Independent Living and ask them if they know anyone. You could, grief counselors are going to be a little more open to dealing with grief, but they still may not know what to do about the disability piece. The most important characteristic in a therapist is teachability.
Mhm.
And if they're willing to learn, they're going to get it pretty quick. I mean, if they're out there digesting material and really going for it because they want to really be of assistance, that's probably a good match. If they're not willing to learn and do some work, that's not a good match.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
A therapist is to have be a safe place
Right.
to hold that space and process and learn and grow and advocate. And I think you both have raised some important questions for a client to ask, as a what do you know about
Right.
client? What are your, what are your perceptions, to kind of get to know where they're at and make sure that it is a comfortable, good fit.
And you're going to know in your gut too if it is or if it isn't.
Mhm. Right.
Yeah. Excellent. So I'm just getting a lot of really good feedback in the chat and just really good stuff here. We have about 15 minutes left. I'm looking for questions. If you all have them, please go ahead and submit them. But I'm wondering if the three of you have any sort of final thoughts about just beginning to adjust, learning to cope, how to get through the hard times. Any final thoughts that you guys might want to share with us?
Use the INR line. That's what we're here for, 8 to 8, Monday through Friday, Eastern.
Very good.
So if you're
Mhm.
having a really hard time, give us a call.
And Sharon, can you explain a little bit more about what the INR line is? What does that mean?
It's an information and referral line where we help you figure out what you need, where it is, how to get it, what your next steps might be, and also kind of validate feelings and let you know you're not alone and let you know it's going to be okay. And that we're not going anywhere. We're going to be here and try to connect you to whatever or whoever you need to speak to in order to take that next step. And that's why, a lot of times the webinars kind of are the preceding step or the next step. We'll often refer people to, why don't you go back and look at this YouTube webinar on this subject or that subject, or just kind of point resources out to people, try to get them connected with a local chapter of a consumer organization in their area, or just try in some way to get them connected with someone that can walk a little more beside them than we can nationally.
Excellent. I do see another question real quick that I'll put in here before Becky and Bill talk. It's how do you find a way to schedule your day? Well, it just passed. I just heard it and then I need to go back to it again. Working a day was set. I'm sorry. I'm trying to hear this and talk at the same time. So now that VR is done, how do you start to come by routines, I think, maybe, and scheduling your day, and
So
not get stuck?
I use, I mean, if you're talking about just scheduling your day, I use the calendar app on my phone, and it keeps me very well posted on what I need to do for that day. I got to this presentation early because I set reminders and set a calendar, and I used my technology effectively for me. So that's one way to do it. You know, at this point, everybody in their house has an Amazon Echo or a Google Home device, you know, one of those smart speakers. You can set reminders on those as well. You can set appointments on those. You know, there's lots of ways to use those things in a way that is productive for you. It's not just about listening to music. It's about using your technology effectively. And there's lots of things in technology that you can do. And so the other thing that I would do is make sure you put the APH webinars on your calendar, because a lot of them, well, pretty much all of them, are extremely important. And I'm a huge fan of APH. They've been around and part of my life for almost my entire life. I was diagnosed at a really young age, like 3, you know, and so all throughout grade school, all throughout high school, all throughout my you know, professional career, APH has been there for me with some type of large print book, braille book, device that they've put together, basically invented and put out into the community. APH has been there for me for over 150 years. So if you're not making APH a regular part of what you do, that's a mistake. I think you need to look at their list of webinars, and you need to jump into the ones that you feel are right for you, because they have webinars on almost everything dealing with vision loss and rehab and blindness, and, you know, being a teacher of the visually impaired. I mean, I can go on, and I very often do. So I'm going to be quiet now. But APH is the right way to go.
You bring up an excellent point. We offer webinars on a variety of topics, and just to let you know that we archive our webinars on our YouTube playlist, and so our website, if you want to check those out, is aphconnectcenter.org, and then you'll navigate to the webinars page, aphconnectcenter.org. And so we have done webinars. We are currently in the middle of doing a series all about diabetes. So every other month we have a webinar for people who are low vision and diabetic, and how to, where the next one coming up is going to feature a demonstration of the Dexcom continuous glucose monitoring system. So lots of good stuff there. We are planning on doing a webinar all about cooking and helpful tips and tricks to be safe and creative in the kitchen. We're looking at doing a webinar all around fall prevention and emergency preparedness. We are going to have a wonderful webinar. You have to come on July 26th, the anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. We will have the author Hannah Fairbairn, who wrote a phenomenal book titled When You Can't Believe Your Eyes. I have said, I think it should be titled Blindness 101 or Low Vision 101, because she covers everything in the book. So she's going to come and talk to us about self-advocacy. We're looking at partnering with someone to help us do a webinar all about home maintenance and home repairs. So we really just want to be here for people and just get this information to the people who want to hear it. And we are always very open to your suggestions. If you have any suggestions on topics that you want to know more about, please feel free to let us know, because that's what we're doing this for. It is all about you guys. And so I do want to go back very briefly. Let's see. Okay, we have 8 minutes still yet. Bill, you talked excellently about using our tools and technology. What strategies might you all have about creating a routine for yourself? Not necessarily the tools part, but the actual stuff.
I break my day into pieces. And remember that when you're adjusting, it's going to take you longer to do each piece than it used to. So give yourself the time so that you don't panic because you've run out of time because you forgot it takes longer. So give yourself extra cushion time. Reward yourself for the things that you've done well. If you have a to-do list, check the things off so you can see the progress that you've made. There are lots of different worksheets that you can do for managing a routine. I don't want to get into that here because it would take hours and hours, but there's lots of different routine sheets you can use to schedule things. One might be something as simple as 3 things I want to do in the morning, 3 things I want to do in the afternoon, how I want to relax in the evening, and 3 things I'm grateful for. But they can be anything. I mean, I've got tons and tons of them, but anything like that.
Great idea. I hope that helped. I think we had someone in the audience who had asked about that. Let's see.
I'm also going to say that it's really important to set reminders for yourself, because as you're going through vision loss, you're going to get consumed with things that you're doing and doing them differently. And it's very easy to get forgetful as you're going through this. It's very easy to get forgetful. So I would set reminders on all the things that you need to do, set them on whatever device you have. When planning your day, it's just really important to know, especially the important stuff, that you have to do it at a specific time. And so set those reminders, set appointments on your calendar, make each task that you need to do an appointment on your calendar, and that'll work for you.
Awesome. That is wonderful. Well, let's see. How are we on time here? I'm just trying to be mindful of our time. We have 5 minutes, guys. Any last minute burning questions that you guys want to ask? Or Bill, I know you've been in the chat. Have you seen anything that you want to address, or any last parting comments?
Yeah. Alexandra's been talking about a client of hers that seems to be stuck in the depression phase of grief. And so the key in working with that person is to sometimes, you have to give that person time to process what they're going through. So it's important to back off, but not back away, right? So you're not turning around and walking. You're backing off. You're giving that person a little bit of space, but you're not backing away completely. And every now and then you can insert some encouragement in helping the person, kind of get through this. And people are going to go through it in their own pace. They're not going to, there's not a time frame for everyone that it's going to work in. And I know you don't think that, but I just want to be clear to anybody else listening that not everybody's time frame is exactly the same.
Right.
Very good. Yeah. So I have a question for our audience. If this is resonating with you all, I'd love to hear from you. I do ask of you, please, when you get the follow-up email, please consider taking the survey so we know what you like, what you don't like, what you want more of. And to that end, would you all want another webinar like this? Are there topics that we haven't covered that you would like us to cover in a webinar similar to this? What do y'all think about that? We'll give you a moment to speak up about that. Becky, do you have any final thoughts? I'm sorry, I haven't given you a space to talk.
Oh, I'm nodding my head, agreeing with what's been said too. Yeah, I think that space, I like the term fellow travelers. And I think to remind ourselves, we're on this journey together. We can, you can help and contribute, and at times we need that help and others to contribute to us. And I think finding our purpose, finding our why, just it helps us get through those challenging days, and knowing you're not alone.
Yep.
I think.
And even giving us a suggestion is a contribution.
Absolutely.
Because you've helped the whole field.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I really just want to thank you all so very much. Thank our panel. You guys have been amazing. just the sheer value of information you all have shared is just absolutely wonderful. And I suspect that we will be doing something like this again. And there was someone that asked a question early on about where you can go to find out more information about ages and stages and different age groups. And I just want to recommend, again, going to aphconnectcenter.org. And from there, you can reach our 3 websites. There's Family Connect, which is for children and families. And then there's Career Connect, which is for transition age youth or job seekers who are blind or visually impaired. And then, of course, there's Vision Aware for people who are new to vision loss or for seniors. So please go and check out those websites. There is so much good stuff there. I can't even begin to tell you. Thank you all so much for attending. You guys have been great. The chat has been amazing. We are going to make sure that our hosts get the chat. So don't worry about if you've asked a question and it has not been answered, we will get to you. Don't worry.